Iran releases 10 American sailors detained overnight, a move U.S. Secretary John Kerry calls a testament to diplomacy. This just days ahead of the expected implementation of the nuclear accord. One person is killed when Israel's Air Force strikes a terror cell in northern Gaza, which was on the way to plant explosives by the border. In response, Hamas warns that Jerusalem is playing with fire. And U.S. President Barack Obama delivers his final State of the Union address, outlining policy goals for his last year in office and rejecting the notion America's influence abroad is on the decline. Welcome back to the news today. U.S. President Barack Obama delivered his final State of the Union address to Congress last night, in which he stressed that America was not in economic decline nor getting weaker on the international stage. He also laid out policy goals for his last year in office. Eli Ochenberg, diplomatic correspondent for the News Today, reports.
The President of the United States.
Tonight marks the 8th year that I've come here to report on the State of the Union. For this final one, I'm going to try to make it a little shorter.
7 years after America was swept by the winds of change, U.S. President Barack Obama has returned to being the face of hope. In his final State of the Union speech, Obama seems to have been once again glowing with all his glory and all promises.
I will keep working to shut down the prison at Guantanamo. It is expensive, it is unnecessary, and it only serves as a recruitment brochure for our enemies.
The enemies of the U.S. were a main topic in Obama's message, which sought to undermine fear and reassert security.
As we focus on destroying ISIL, over-the-top claims that this is World War III just play into their hands. They pose an enormous danger to civilians. They have to be stopped, but they do not threaten our national existence.
But it was another frenemy of Washington which was at the center of attention, as at the same time Obama was on podium hailing the nuclear deal he pushed for with Iran. A naval incident in which Iran detained American sailors was underway, yet left unmentioned. What was also disregarded completely was the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and what maybe symbolized more than anything else that his administration has let go of the issue. But soon there will be a new administration with a new head, and the reigning president didn't spare his own thoughts on the intensifying race.
When politicians insult Muslims, whether abroad or our fellow citizens, when a mosque is vandalized or a kid is called names, that doesn't make us safer. It's just wrong. It diminishes us in the eyes of the world. It makes it harder to achieve our goals. It betrays who we are as a country.
By next year, it will be a different president making his way to the iconic podium, and Barack Obama will return to being an American citizen. After 7 years, even the biggest cynics might admit that last night in Washington, there was a sense of closure, maybe even pride, in the leading nation of the free world.
And joining me right now is Michael Oren, Knesset member for the Kulanu Party and former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy. Good to be with you.
Always good to have you here. So you heard that Barack Obama giving his statement.
I did.
And some people are saying that maybe it was the best speech that he gave in the last 7 years.
It could be. Listen, I went to a lot of them, and the State of the Union address is always a lot of pomp. It's a lot of ceremony. There's a procession. All the diplomats walk in. All the generals of the general staff walk in. The Supreme Court justices parade in. It's a lot of pomp and circumstance. And Obama's a great speaker. But in past years, he's always set out some plans that seem not quite realistic. There was going to be higher education for everybody in America. I remember 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2015. There were all these different goals because the State of the Union is like that. I think it was a much more personal speech. I think he gave his vision. He talked about what he accomplished. He talked less about what he did not accomplish. For example, he didn't talk about Israelis and Palestinians. But he also set out what he's going to do in the next year. And next year is a very powerful year for a president in his second term. The last year of a second-term president, he doesn't have to worry about being reelected. And it's all about the legacy.
It's all about his own legacy, but
Yes.
didn't he? You know, I'm looking at him, and I'm looking what he did in the last 7 years, and I'm asking myself, you know, maybe he will be remembered as the president that decided to take America out from the world and decided to just take care of the United States.
So he would take issue with that. I mean, a big theme in his
Maybe
speech.
this is the
Big theme in his speech last night was America's still the leading superpower in the world. When there are conflicts in the region or conflicts around the world, people still go to the United States for mediation. I think many people in our area of the world would take issue with that. I know that Iran and Saudi Arabia now at loggerheads, and who do they turn to? They turn to the Germans. They turn to the Russians. Not everybody's turning to the United States, but that's the way that Obama presented it. What is interesting about this president, Lucy, and I have accompanied his administration now since the first day in office, is the degree to which the president is consistent. He is in his inauguration address in 2009, he talked about closing the Guantanamo facility.
Yes.
What did he talk about last night? I'm going to close the Guantanamo facility. He talked about gay rights. He talked about outreach to the Muslim world. He talked about Iran last night. Very consistent. I still think he's going to do something on gun control, and he's going to do something on immigration reform.
You know, he didn't mention Donald Trump. He mentioned like the subtext was, and the subtext was maybe also about Israel and the Palestinians, but he didn't mention Israel and the Palestinians.
No.
And I'm asking myself, is he really just decided to give up on Israel and the Palestinians and said, you know what, that's it? Or the personal relationship is that bad with Benjamin Netanyahu? Or really, he just doesn't care?
I think that he has reached the point where he's not going to invest any more capital. Again, a year, I said, is a long time, but if you're going to have a peace process that's going to last a year and a half, it's not a very long time. He's not going to initiate anything. That's what he said. But that does not mean that he will not support initiatives by other countries. And there is a French initiative that's pending in the Security Council. There's a New Zealand initiative. And no one's saying what the United States is going to veto that at all. A lot of it depends on the way the resolution is framed. And if Palestinian diplomats are smart, they can frame it in a way that the United States wouldn't object to it.
Let's talk a little bit about the nuclear program and the nuclear accord with Iran. Yesterday, it came just as a bad time when the sailors were caught. And it seems that he couldn't just, like, let's say, praise the accord too much because of just what just happened.
Right.
At the end of the day, do you think that he will look back and he will say it was a mistake?
No. I do not.
Really?
I don't think that. First of all, I don't think he has that general tendency, and many leaders do not have that tendency to say I made a mistake. How many leaders in the world actually say that they made a mistake? I think if the agreement collapses, if Iran emerges 10, 15 years from now as a nuclear power, the president may look back and say, "Look, I gave the world 10, 15 years, and that's more than you would have had if it weren't for the agreement." For Israel, it's still going to be a problem because this regime is very strong. In 2009, going back to 2009, the Iranian regime had a dry run for the Arab Spring. It was called the Green Revolution. They learned how to crush it really quickly. And now they have a 1 million-man army that can crush anybody who raises their heads up against the regime. The chance of this regime being in place 10, 15 years from now is very good.
If we were looking at the United States like in 10, 15 years, and we would remember Barack Obama as the last president that, you know what, in 4 years, after a new president will be elected, how will we remember Barack Obama? I
think history looks at presidents in very different ways. You know that Harry Truman was considered a terrible president in his day. Today, he's considered one of the great presidents of his time. I think that Obama may be considered what he aspired to be, which was a transformative president, something that was going to change America both in terms of its foreign policy as well as its domestic situations, whether it be Obamacare, gay rights. If he does move ahead on gun control, if he does move on immigration reform, that will be transformative. In terms of America's position in the world, I think you'll agree with me. It has been transformed. Not everybody in the world greets and welcomes and cheers that transformation. We sort of miss the America that was the adult in the room, the policeman of the world. We do. But,
you know, I have one last question. Some people are saying that this speech was really genuine. He really believes in what he is saying. How much?
You seem skeptical. Why? I saw that face.
Skeptical.
Okay.
If we need to put it like in numbers, how much do you think in his term he was a politician and how much he was genuine? We saw the real Barack Obama.
It's interesting. What the real Barack Obama is not that important. I don't think he was a successful politician insofar as he got elected and he ran very good campaigns. He was not a successful politician, and he says this. That he said it in his speech. He did not succeed in reaching across the aisle. He wasn't Roosevelt. He wasn't Lincoln. He couldn't reach across the aisle and get the Republicans to join him. And actually, I thought it was rather admirably he took responsibility, at least partial responsibility for that. If there's anything I know about this president, okay, and I don't pretend to know everything about this president, was that he is not lacking for candor. He was always very open about the things. I was following him very closely about what he thought about the Middle East, what he thought about the Arab world, what he thought about Israel and our conflict with the Palestinians. He was open starting in 2008 when I started following him, just what his positions were going to be, and those positions have not changed. And that is amazing, the degree to which he was very open and remained very consistent.
So we can say that the people who were surprised that Barack Obama is treating some people in a certain way shouldn't have been surprised.
I wasn't surprised. All they had to do was look at his speeches and read his books, and I think they'd be a lot less surprised. People actually don't read these things.
Yes,
unfortunately. One of the things he suffered was he was such a great speaker that people actually didn't listen to what he said.
Because he knows how to say the words.
Very well.
Michael Oren, always a pleasure.
Always
Thank
be with you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Lucy.
Yes, and a 10th German citizen has died from wounds sustained in yesterday's suicide bombing in Istanbul, which also killed a Peruvian tourist. It comes as Germany's interior minister visited Turkey today, where his counterpart confirmed that the suspected attacker had registered with Turkish immigration authorities, but was not on any wanted list. Turkish police detained dozens of people today in the wake of the bombing, including 3 Russian nationals with alleged links to the Islamic State. And joining us right now is Laura Wales. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
So, Laura, you know, when we are starting to talk about people who are linked to Syria, who are linked to IS, we're starting to talk about migrants with identity, you know, different identity coming from Turkey, coming out of Turkey, how much it's hurting the immigrants who are trying to find a haven in these places.
Absolutely. ISIS said that it would try to embed people in the Syrian refugees coming to Europe and other places. And Prime Minister Davutoglu held a press conference today, and he said that this attacker, Nabil Fadli, that he had entered recently as a refugee. There's even video of him on January 5th giving his fingerprints in Istanbul. So this is definitely a very serious issue. You know, ISIS is basically ruining it for all the Syrian refugees who are fleeing war, death and destruction. So many have lost so much.
You know, I'm trying to understand where Turkey is now and where Turkey is headed with the crisis, because since the beginning, maybe in the last 2 years, Laura, you and me, we're talking about the fact that Turkey just observed so many immigrants from the Syrian crisis, and I'm asking myself, where is Turkey standing now on this specific issue?
Well, they made an agreement with the EU for billions of euros, and they're giving Syrian refugees now work permits, but they're also limiting their visas so that they cannot be going in and out of Europe freely. So that's where Turkey is now. So far as the fight on ISIS, well, we know that critics of Turkey have said they've turned a blind eye for many years of foreign fighters transiting from Turkey into Syria. And we know that they've detained 69 people with alleged links to ISIS today. But they've been detaining hundreds since June of suspected ISIS terrorists, and yet they've released almost all of them. Almost right after the attack yesterday, they put in a media ban on the story. So we really don't know exactly what has happened. There have been 3 other big suicide bomb attacks that are by ISIS, and yet the government also instituted media bans on those. So almost no one knows where those investigations are. And if we look at Turkey's most deadly terrorist attack, allegedly by ISIS in October, which killed over 100, the prime minister said 2 days later that Turkey, per its laws, cannot arrest any terrorist until they commit an act. So this is very difficult. And yet, Turkey is now continuing to wage a war against militant Kurds, specifically the Kurdish separatist group PKK, not only in Turkey, but also in northern Iraq. And they've killed what they say almost 3,000 of these militants. Its focus really has been on this struggle and not on ISIS.
Yes, definitely. Laura Wales, thank you very much for this. Thank you. According to a senior Cypriot official, the possible normalization of ties between Israel and Turkey does not need to hurt Jerusalem's warm relations with Nicosia. Avernov Neophytou is the head of Cyprus center-right ruling party and chairman of the Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee. During a visit to Israel this week, he sat down with I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Let's see what he had to say.
We, the Cypriots, would like to improve our relations with Turkey if Turkey is willing to contribute to the solution of the Cyprus issue. We cannot change geography. Turkey will be forever a neighboring country of Israel and of Cyprus. We have to improve our relationship, providing that Turkey respect its obligations, show a respect to the international law and human rights. Turkey contribute to the solution of the Cyprus issue, and Turkey respect the state of Israel.
And the European Commission has opened an unprecedented inquiry into whether new Polish laws break EU democracy rules. Critiques of Poland's right-wing government have protested recently the recent changes to the Constitutional Court and media laws. Maya Margit has more.
Is Poland's democracy on the brink of collapse? The European Commission launched an unprecedented inquiry on Wednesday into whether new Polish laws violate EU democratic rules. This after President Andrzej Duda greenlighted controversial laws that allow his conservative government to appoint heads of public TV and radio, as well as select judges for Poland's Constitutional Court.
I'm also conscious of the recent reform of the media law, which raises issues pertaining to freedom and pluralism of the media. I would like to recall that the rule of law, as defined in the rule of law framework, requires the respect for democracy and for fundamental rights, and that there can be no democracy and respect for fundamental rights without respect for the rule of law, and vice versa.
Critics see the move as the latest attempt by the ruling Law and Justice Party to consolidate power, and are calling it a throwback to Soviet-style politics. Under the new law, senior figures in public radio and television will be appointed and can be sacked by the finance minister. They will no longer be hired through tenders organized by the National Broadcasting Council. The new legislation will also see existing public broadcasting managers fired with immediate effect.
Public media used to be pluralist. There was something for every taste. There were left-leaning conversations and right-leaning conversations. Now this will become governmental media, and thus propaganda.
The judicial changes have led to widespread protests. Tens of thousands took to the streets in major Polish cities over the weekend, many of them shouting anti-government slogans. On Wednesday, European Commission Vice President Franz Timmermans said the goal of the probe is to, quote, start a dialogue with Poland. But the Polish government insists the changes are perfectly consistent with the rule of law and that Brussels should mind its own business. If the Commission deems Warsaw's new legislation to be a systemic threat to basic EU values, they could suspend Poland's voting rights in the EU Council, where member states shape EU policy.
And oil advanced for the first time in 8 days overnight, but then dipped, ending just above $30 a barrel. For Insight, I'm joined by Natalie Ehrlich, host of I-24 News Economy Magazine. Good evening.
Good evening.
What's going on?
All right. Well, oil, it's a trouble spot these days for the markets. So we saw that crude actually rose for the first time overnight in 8 days, as you mentioned, largely in part because Chinese imports of crude hit a fresh new record of 7.8 million barrels back in December, this reading that we got. However, what we did see later in the day from the United States, the Energy Administration there indicated that there was actually a commercial oversupply that increased by 200,000 barrels. And so that added pressure on the markets. And so we saw a lot of gains for oil, but then they dropped, though they did manage to stay above that all-important $30 mark.
So what impact did that have on world markets?
Right, so that offered a lot of reprieve for the markets. A lot of them were rallying, especially in Europe. We saw huge gains, huge rallies over there, but by the end of the trading day, we saw the DAX even drop by 0.25%, although the French CAC and the London's FTSE managed to stay above, just slightly above that flat line over there.
So how long can we see oil prices stay at the same low level?
Well, what's really stimulating this is this oversupply in the markets. And so just on Tuesday, we saw the U.S. government release this forecast that they're expecting this glut to last until late 2017. And with sanctions on Iran expected to be lifted, we can expect even more supply to flood this market. So it could last for some time.
Well, Liza, we will continue waiting. Natalie Ehrlich, thank you very much.
Thank you.
South Korea urged the international community, and in particular China, to ensure that Pyongyang is punished for its latest atomic test. Her comments come as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un definitely called for an expansion of the size and power of his country's nuclear arsenal. Tamara Ziv reports.
South Korean President Park Geun-hye said Wednesday that China is key in an international response to North Korea's latest nuclear test.
I'm certain that China is very well aware if such a strong will isn't followed by necessary steps. We will not be able to stop the North's 5th and 6th nuclear tests, and we cannot guarantee true peace and stability of the Korean peninsula.
Her comments came as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un defiantly told his scientists to swell the size of the country's nuclear arsenal with more powerful bombs capable of striking the United States.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called for bolstering up in both quality and quantity the nuclear force capable of making nuclear strikes at the US-led imperialists, anytime and in any space, according to the order of the Workers' Party of Korea Central Committee, if they encroach upon the sovereignty of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and make threatening provocations. He set forth the important tasks to be fulfilled to bolster up the nuclear force.
Meanwhile, a military official said South Korea fired warning shots near an unidentified flying object over its border with North Korea. The official at South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the object returned to the northern side of the border following the warning shots. The South Yonhap news agency reported that the object was a suspected North Korean drone and that South Korean forces fired about 20 machine gun rounds at it. North Korea says last week's nuclear test was of a miniaturized hydrogen bomb, a claim largely dismissed by experts who argue the yield was far too low for a full-fledged thermonuclear device. Experts on Wednesday also branded North Korea's latest submarine missile test as a catastrophic failure, dismissing footage released by the North as fake and manipulated to give the impression of a successful outcome.
Yes, the big night has arrived for American lottery players, with the Powerball jackpot having reached $1.5 billion, the largest ever prize. The payout has increased due to strong ticket sales in anticipation of tonight's draw. Whomever wins can choose between a one-time cash payout of $930 million or the full sum paid over 29 years. And with me right now is Jonathan Ragib, host of IP4 News Sports Magazine.
Hello.
Hi, thank you very much for joining us.
Anytime. Glad to be here.
I'm trying to be relaxed.
Yes, and you are succeeding.
I am?
For now.
Okay. So I will be like, because sometimes people are telling me that it's maybe a little bit. So I'm, okay.
But I'm not.
Yes. So let's start talking about football, but
American football. Believe it or not, Los Angeles, the second largest market in America, had no football team for the past 21 years. Since the Rams moved to St. Louis in 1994, there's no football team in LA.
How come?
I don't know, but it's insane how a city like LA, mad about sports, one of only 2 cities that have hosted 2 Olympic Games so far, how did they not have a football team? That is over. The Rams are moving back from St. Louis to LA. As of the next season, they will be the LA Rams. And the crowd, the fans in LA are very, very happy to finally have their own football team back. They've been waiting for more than 20 years. time for the Rams to be back?
You know, it's because I'm just thinking about it because LA is all of them there are actors.
Pretty much, yeah. But how come Hollywood, there's so many football movies coming out of Hollywood and no football team based there? It's crazy. It's insane.
This is a solution. Maybe all the actors can be
perform.
Yeah. Perform.
Pretend as if you're football players and make up
and then
a
they can
team.
find a job.
Yes.
And not wait or like in.
Once they wait for someone to read their script and for them to be discovered. We've seen too many movies, you and I.
Too many.
Yes.
Jerome Valk.
Yeah, someone who will have a lot of time to watch movies now is Jerome Valk. We spoke about him last year, that the FIFA Ethics Committee, they want to ban him for 9 years. The former Secretary General of FIFA, and FIFA have now dismissed him. They're not waiting for the Ethics Committee to to come up with their final solution, final decision. They are now basically dismissing him. All the old guard in FIFA, whether it's Sepp Blatter, Jerome Valk, Michel Platini, who was at UEFA but had a lot of connections with FIFA, they're now all gone basically. Next month, on February 26th, we'll have elections. Someone else will come in, and they will have, whoever comes in will have a very big task of cleaning up the mess that has been there in FIFA for the past 40 years at least.
Okay, now we're going to talk about ice, baby. Yes.
Yes. I wonder if Vanilla Ice is watching us.
Yeah.
All right, stop, collaborate, and listen.
The fact that you just go with the flow with me.
Yes. And I've just said the first line of the song, which I remember, but it's the only one I remember.
Yeah, I think I remember only ice, baby.
Yeah. All right, stop, collaborate, and listen. That's as far as I go, and I'll stop singing right now.
Yeah.
But I will speak of the ice race, which took place in Munich a few days ago, and there's North American success as Cameron Naz from the US, he won the men's race. This is the second race of the season, and he won them both. And the winner in the yes, pretty much.
Ow!
They skate fast.
It's like ouch.
Yes, but that's what these guys like. Jacqueline Legger from Canada, she won the women's race. This is very, very fast.
Ow.
Obviously, we think of
Why?
ice skating because it's a competition and you want to make it as fast as you can. Very simple. And this is the second leg. There are 2 more legs coming up. There are 4 races throughout the winter. This is the second one.
Yeah,
happened in Munich, Germany.
Shai is saying a lot of broken legs also.
A lot of yes. I mean, in skiing and ice skating, these are things that happen. And we think of ice skating as skiing in the rain with snow, like there is in New York, what we see again in the movies. No, not this case.
What movies did you see?
They have in Home Alone, I'm sure.
Yeah, I love that movie.
He stays in the hotel and then do you know where Macaulay Culkin is up to now? He's gone.
Okay.
Not Home Alone anymore.
Thank you.
Yes.
And not Home Alone.
A lot of sports today in the sports segment.
Thank you. Yes, and we're going out for a small break, an update from our news desk, and then we will be back. Don't go anywhere.